Hello everyone! Let's wrap up what we have learned so far and introduce a way to address some of the challenges for operationalizing the triple nexus. When you have completed this topic, you should be able to reflect on the link between resilience and the triple nexus, list some of the aspects that are hindering the triple nexus, and consider the possibility for a stairway integration according to increasing levels of trust between humanitarian and development actors. During the first weeks of this course, we learned that resilience in practice is about embracing change and improving the performance when dealing with problematic situations. We define a problematic situation as the gap between the current and desired to the desired situation. This way, resilience requires us to move away from simply looking at what an individual, household, or system has and recognizing and enhancing the way such a person or system performs to better deal with hazard events due to stresses over a long time or sudden shocks. We realize that we can build the resilience capacities for coping, adapting, and transforming by strengthening key qualities of the system's performance. Therefore, we all look for examples of resilience in our professional life or our work in humanitarian WASH, and reflective on the different qualities that were present at that moment: robustness, redundancy, resourcefulness, rapidity, flexibility, inclusiveness, reflectiveness, and integration. Although our individual examples helped us to get familiar with the concept of resilience, to focus more on the adaptive and transformative capacities, building resilient systems should consider outcomes at four levels: the health and well-being of individuals, people, the system services, place, the economy and society, organization, and leadership and strategy, knowledge. Indeed, collective sub-outcomes for WASH resilience and peace requires to consider prevention and anticipate problems with WASH services, health preparedness and recovery, and support social cohesion, individual capacities, and local contributions. Last but not least, we realize that resilience is not a matter of one moment in time. Instead, it has a development line with its ups and downs, and particularly in fragile contexts, better ways of working are necessary in which humanitarian, development, and peace actors can achieve greater development goals and long-term cost savings. We introduce the triple nexus between the multiple actors in the WASH sector as a way to link short-term or humanitarian actions with long-term of development interventions in a conflict-sensitive way. However, the nexus approach is not entirely new. In the 80s, it was first mentioned as the link between humanitarian relief and development. In the 90s, it was reframed as the relief-development continuum. In the 2000s, the coordination improved by initiating the global cluster system, and in the recent years, it has been focused on resilience and developing new or better ways of working. Moreover, the recent commitments give a new push to the triple nexus. The World Humanitarian Summit urged the international aid system, including the United Nations, non-governmental organizations, and bilateral donors, to commit to reinforce and do not replace national and local systems, to anticipate and do not wait for crises, to transcend the humanitarian development peace divide by working towards collective outcomes. On the development side, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has the commitment of leaving no one behind and reaching the farthest behind first to ensure the safety, dignity, and ability to thrive of the most vulnerable. Last but not least, there is a request to all United Nations entities and the World Bank to mobilize their capacity for mediation and conflict resolution amidst protracted global displacement. Despite the history of efforts and the recent commitments, challenges remain. Here are a few examples of the many aspects that are hindering the implementation of the triple nexus. A stairwise integration between humanitarian and development actors is a good start. According to the increasing levels of trust, the willingness of the governments or authorities to protect the population, the organizational capacities and community capitals, and the security and access conditions, actors can define whether if they want to start simply by networking, moving up to coordination or task sharing complementarity, working in cooperation by getting closer and taking over some of each other's activities, and collaborating by planning joint or mixed interventions. Defining how the collective outcomes and the way of integration look like depends on the specific context of the WASH system. Therefore, we will show next an example of Burkina Faso, which introduces and explains better this approach.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a big pleasure for me to be here with you today. So I will bring some experience from Burkina Faso, where I've been working for the last 2 years as a WASH cluster coordinator. Next slide, please. So the context in Burkina Faso is the context of a recent and quickly deteriorating crisis. So it was a country that was considered very stable and peaceful for a long time, but very suddenly the crisis came, and very quickly it covered huge parts of the territory. And this crisis has been overlapping with pre-existing very low levels of service in terms of access to water and sanitation. So there has been a massive displacement of population throughout all 2019. We've had more than 20% additional ADPs every month, and the rhythm has been slowed down a little bit in 2020, but still in 2021, but it is still going on. And we have now more than 1.2 million displaced people in Burkina, which is more than 6% of the population. So this creates really massive needs in WASH, because the displaced people are actually, most of them are hosted in existing towns and cities, and basically they share the same infrastructure with their host communities. And the access rates were very low before the crisis and have been actually decreasing even more due to this massive arrival of displaced people in the same areas. So we've had approximately a 20% decrease in access rates to water in most of the affected towns. So this actually shows that the country has been stepping backwards in terms of SDGs. And this year, we estimate more than 2.5 million people in need of humanitarian WASH assistance. Next slide, please. So why do we need a nexus approach in this context? So we have a few challenges, of course, many challenges, but we also have many opportunities. And the opportunity is really this overlapping of structural and conjunctural problems. And we have also geographical convergence. So the same intervention areas of humanitarian stakeholders and development stakeholders that were in the country before the crisis. And so we have the WASH development actors that are many, well established in the country, that have a good knowledge of the context. They have quite a significant budget. There is a donor coordination in place. There is an operational and committed Ministry of Water. So they have a lot of comparative advantages. But at the same time, they don't have the expertise and the rapidity to act in a crisis. And on the other side, we have the WASH humanitarian actors They're fewer, they're recently arrived in the country, but they're flexible and they have specific expertise for emergency. And they have also better access to insecure areas. At the same time, they don't have the expertise, the time, and they don't have the mandate and the funding to address all the structural problems that were there before. So this really shows that the two types of stakeholders are complementary and they really need to work together in order to address the challenges of the wash sector. Next slide, please. So the vision we have in Burkina Faso of the nexus is that we see it as a stairways in which we have progressive collaboration between these different stakeholders based on increasing level of trust. So the first step of the stairways is really to have networking and information exchange and contact, communication between the two different stakeholders. So we really encourage to have meetings with humanitarian actors and development actors talking to each other to explain what are they doing, each one of them in the same areas, so that we have this information exchange, which is very important. For example, we have the WASH cluster that participates in WASH development donor meetings. We have also the coordination of the WASH cluster that has been opened to all the development NGOs. And we have also the norms that the technical norms that we are putting in place that are transitional norms. So they're in between the sphere emergency norms and the government norms. So they're a sort of compromise between the two stakeholders. Then the second step in the stairways is coordination, which means really start to do some tasks sharing, really make the complementarity play. So for example, in some areas, we have first water tracking, which is after taken over by water point construction. We also have some networks which need rehabilitation, but at the same time need expansion. So we try to find a complementarity. So development actors will do the expansion part and emergency actors will do the rehabilitation parts of the works, for example. Then the further step upwards is cooperation, which means really getting closer, being flexible, taking over each other's projects. For example, we have the public utility, which is taking over some water points built by UNICEF in Kaya. And then the fourth step, which is really a good nexus and integration and collaboration, is, for example, joint or mixed interventions, where the two category of actors, development and humanitarian, will really build a project together. So this is like the theoretical stairways, and we really have examples at each level of the stairway. I'll go more into detail of two examples now. Very quickly, since I see my time is almost over, sorry. So the first is about the WASH cluster advocacy with development donors. So we've been really discussing a lot with development donors in order to have them fund also the emergency affected areas. And thanks to this advocacy work with the development donors and the government, we managed to gain a lot of funding that was development funding, but has also been used fit the displaced people and at the same time the host communities. Next slide, please. So this is the example in the stairways. For example, the fact that we exchanged together, we participated in the meetings. So it led to this taking over of UNICEF water point in Kaya by the public utility. So it shows how we are actually moving upwards in the stairways. Next slide, please. So the example of Chibo network is the one I mentioned about the network rehabilitation expansion. We have 4 different stakeholders, 2 development actors and 2 humanitarian actors that are really getting together in order to work on the Jibo network. Next slide, please. So this also sees how we can move forward in the network as trust is built between the stakeholders. So at the beginning, it's just really sharing tasks. I do this, you do that. And later on, the same actors are actually building a Nexus project together in another town. So it shows that as they get to know each other and the trust is built, so they can really move forward in the Nexus. Next slide, please. So to conclude, the Nexus collaboration, to establish this Nexus, trust is very important. So we need to move forward from low levels of collaboration to higher levels based on this trust, which is built between different category of stakeholders. And we all have a common objective, which is to respond to immediate needs while at the same time contributing to the SDGs. We also agree on common values, which are localization, accountability, quality, human rights. So we have to try to focus on the values that we have in common and not on the things that tear us apart. We have to recognize and make the most of the complementarities. We have to increase flexible resource mobilization, and we have to strengthen government capacity for emergency preparedness and response. So that was my conclusion. Thank you very much.